Welcome to this episode of the Structural Engineering Channel, a podcast focused on helping structural engineering professionals stay up to date on technical trends in the field and to help them succeed in their careers and lives. In this episode, I'll be talking with Will Dahl, structural engineer at Colliers Engineering and Design, about unique aspects of working in a small firm and how it differs from his experiences working in a larger firm. We'll be taking a deeper dive into the various projects he's worked on in both settings, advantages and challenges of team collaboration and communication. And he's also going to provide some great advice on how to choose between working in a smaller firm or a larger engineering firm. I'm your co-host, Matt Cardle, and this is the Structural Engineering Channel podcast. Before we get started, here's a quick word from our sponsor for this episode, Colliers Engineering and Design.
Thank you to EMI's sponsor, Colliers Engineering and Design, a national full-service A&E firm. As an industry leader, CED believes it has a responsibility to ensure the built environment is constructed with a commitment to the inclusivity, health, and welfare of our people, clients, and communities. CED's expansion has fostered an enterprising culture that provides opportunities for employees to grow their careers while accelerating their personal and professional success. For more information about how you can join their team, find them on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, or visit their website at colliersengineering.com.
Well, welcome to the show. Could you tell us a little bit about your journey into the world of structural engineering and what got you into this field? What sparked your interest?
Sure. So I've been working as a structural engineer for about 25 plus years now. I've been strictly just doing structural engineering and building designs. I guess I started like any other engineer started. I like to figure out how things got put together, and that always interested me. Starting way back from like Legos or something like that. Then I was always good at math too. So in high school, I definitely knew I wanted to get into the engineering field, or at least study engineering in college. And then when I got to college, I saw that there was a course for architectural engineering. That was one of the branches of engineering you could get into. And I wanted to get more into buildings and architecture. I thought that was interesting at the time. So what they were teaching in architectural engineering was, your mechanical, electrical, plumbing designs. They even had like a lighting course, an illumination course. And then, of course, they had a structural engineering, your steel designs, your concrete designs, and even your timber designs. So that's what I focused on, even though you're required to take the other courses for your MEP as well. But I tried to focus on just structural design. That the more I got into the program, the more I was interested in just structural engineering. So then when I got out of school, I had a BS in architectural engineering, and then that's when I started looking for a job as a structural engineer for building design is what I was looking for. That was my focus.
And do you think how did your college courses prepare you for what you do now on an everyday basis as a structural engineer, or what they could have been doing better in terms of the courses that they teach?
So, the first couple of years, you're just taking your core classes, and that's your basic, calculus, differential equations, chemistry, physics. Every engineer had to take those, and that was just basic. So it didn't really get into the nitty-gritty until the last couple of years in school. And then when I was taking, your timber design and your steel design and your concrete design, part of that was preparing projects and preparing drawings, which at the time I thought were good drawings and good designs. You don't realize it until you get out there how to actually make it into a workable design and workable drawings. But that gave you a basis of what should be prepared in terms of a drawing and in terms of design. And there's basis that I use still to today. A shear moment diagram, a simple body diagram. those are things that I will always be using, just because just how we work with our projects, you're looking for speed and you're looking for efficiency. So if you can get a simple supported beam and you can solve that quickly, then you can just move on and start designing more complex things. So, WL squared over 8, I learned it in college. I still use it every single day. So it's just your basic building blocks and your basic tools that would help you, advance. I don't think I really became a structural engineer, though, until a good 4 or 5 years after practicing and working in a structural engineering firm. I think it takes you that long where it clicks and it comes to you, and you're just like, okay, now this makes sense. Now I understand why these pieces are putting together. Part of it is you're out in the field and you're seeing things and you're trying to figure out how things get put together, and you don't know it in school until you actually go and you see it on the site. And then once you see it on the site, then things start clicking, and then your design starts clicking as well, and your problem solving starts clicking too. But getting back to your original question, it was the basic building blocks and the basic tools in my box that I used that I still use every day, but I definitely needed those in school.
Yeah, I know for me, even talking to or helping out new engineers, they're often surprised because they learn so much in terms of what their college courses offer. There's a lot to learn. But then when we kind of just get down to their first engineering problem, it's okay, let's go back to the basics, free body diagram and
Right.
finding your moment. And then this is where it all starts. This is where it all ends because of all the fancy programming. You need to learn how to back check it, build up
That's
your
right.
engineering intuition. And so they're often surprised by that. It's like they might expect they need to do software all the time. No, a lot of the times, it's 90% of the time you go back to the basics. Yeah.
Right. And for me, I'm an older engineer, and I've had a bunch of younger engineers underneath me, and I don't let them use the programs and the apps. The apps are great. The apps are fantastic, and they'll spit it out, and you'll get an answer. But I want them to use their calculator first and then go back with the app. Try to figure out what the app is saying. Is the app giving you an answer you were expecting? You just can't give me an answer from the app. What does that actually mean? You have to understand what's going into the app, so then you can say, yes, what's coming out of it does make sense. So when I'm teaching the younger engineers that are under me, I want them to do hand calcs first, and I want them to struggle with their calculator first. And once they have an understanding from that, then yes, then I would feel comfortable using the apps and having them use the apps.
Yeah, I do think that is one of the newer skills that some of the more senior engineers need to instill upon the new incoming students, because yeah, there's software everywhere, and it's so easy to just, how do you know that's right? Oh, the software told me. It's so dangerous, but it's so
Right.
easy. And yeah.
It
And
is. But the issue is it's fast too, right?
yeah.
You don't, but you need that struggle the first couple of years when you're out of school to understand and go forward and get faster. If you don't get that struggle, I don't think you're going to progress. So if you're just getting answers out of the application, yes, you're going fast, and we're keeping the job under budget, which is what we always have to do. But you need to struggle. So the first 1 or 2 years that I'm teaching a younger engineer, I know he's not going to hit the budgets. We're going to blow budgets, and that's okay. Because I know in the long run, if he struggles the first couple of years, I'll get him in the next couple of years, and he'll be a well-oiled machine. And then at that point, we'll be under budget. I'm okay with that. So I know the first couple of years we're not going to be under budget. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Lots of training. I know you have an intriguing career path. I believe you started off at a small firm and then transitioned to a larger firm. Is that correct?
Yes. So actually, my first job out of school, I and this is how old I am. I found my first job in the classifieds of the New York Times.
Oh, okay.
I opened up the classifieds and I saw the number, and it was a listing for a structural engineer, entry level structural engineer in New York City. So that's where I started. I don't think anybody finds jobs through the New York Times Classified, but that's what you did back in the 90s. So yes, I started at a very small structural engineering firm. It was a sole proprietorship. I was one of 5 engineers at the time, and I thought it was a fantastic experience because it was such a small firm that you had to start producing right away, and you had to start getting your hands dirty right away. So I was thrown many jobs right away, and you had to start figuring jobs out quickly and start producing jobs. And the type of jobs we were doing, since we were a small firm, we weren't doing large projects in New York City. We were doing small, mostly renovations, some new stuff here and there, but a lot of renovation stuff. But I saw a lot of wood right away. I saw a lot of masonry. I saw a lot of steel and concrete, very basic stuff that everybody should know. But on the same point, I was also going to job sites and in New York City, looking at old buildings from the 1800s to the present day. So I don't think I would have got that experience if I was at a large firm. I got the experience at a smaller firm because it was necessary, it was needed. I was one of 5. If I wasn't going out, the guy sitting right next to me was going out. We were all going out. We were all looking at the same types of buildings and we're trying to figure out how things got put together. And then we were trying to understand and learn all the materials. So for me, that it was a fantastic experience. My boss at the time, he had come from a larger structural engineering firm. He actually came from an AE firm in New York City, and then he branched out on his own. But his background was a very strong structural engineering background. So he was very accommodating and helping and teaching. And I try to use the same things that he taught me when I teach new younger engineers also. But he put in, it was his job, it was his business, it was his everything, it was his life. So he put a lot into it, and he put in a lot into you as well. So we produced for him, and the same token, he was making us stronger engineers. So working at the smaller firm, it was fantastic. I wouldn't give it up for anything. I spent 17 years there, and it was fantastic. I did eventually, though, move. And the reason is I got a family and I can't stay in New York City forever. So we did eventually move to New Jersey. And at that point, I didn't want to do the hustle in and out of the city every day. So I found another firm in New Jersey. And that's what led me to Colliers Engineering, which at the time was called Mazer Consulting. And right now we're about 2,200 people. But at the time, when I was brought in, maybe about 10 years ago, it was about 500 or 600 people, but still relatively large from, I was coming from a 6 and 7 person firm, and now it was coming into an extremely large firm. So at the time it was overwhelming, the first month or two, but like any new job, you get used to the atmosphere. So in terms of the contrast between the small and the large, the large is on every scale is so much bigger. Just from your basic stuff, like what you have at a large firm that you don't have at a small firm. The large firms have a human resources department. They have a marketing department. They have business development department. But we didn't have any of that in a small firm. In the small firm, you did that all. Right now I have an AR team, an accounts receivable team that helps me go and find missing invoices that aren't being paid. When I was in the smaller firm, that was me. The secretary was the HR and the marketing. It was all in one. Or we would market. We were engineers that were marketing as a small firm. So that was a great advantage. Once you get to the large firm, you're just like, oh, all these little things that I don't need to do anymore because that's already taken care of, which was a great feeling. Now you can just concentrate on just your engineering. Also, when I moved to the larger firm, it right now I would say it's an EA firm. It's an engineering dominant with an architectural division and architectural department.
Mm-hmm.
But having all the different other types of engineering services within the same firm and underneath the same umbrella was really great. In the small firm, it was strictly structural building design. Now, when I moved to the large firm, I have my civil site engineers right down the hall. I could always talk to him and figure out how it's working, or his site plan is going. The geotechnical engineer, which we would always sub consult out at the smaller firm, now he's right around the corner from me. And if I ever have any kind of soils question, I could just drop him in and just ask him a question. I'm sure he doesn't want me dropping on in, but I can do that.
Yeah.
But and then because all these engineers are all under the same umbrella, a lot of the jobs would come to me through in-house engineers. So it takes away a little bit of going and hustling and getting out on the street and hustling for that work, because the majority of my work is in-house. I am supporting the other engineering departments in Mazer, but now it's called Colliers. So that's the huge advantage there is that I do have work that's constant. It's always coming in. And then in terms of a social, it's night or day. When in the smaller firm, we would do our holiday dinners and the 5 to 10 of us would go out and it'd be a very nice, intimate dinner and we'd celebrate the holidays. And now when I'm at Colliers, it's a large party down in Atlantic City, like hundreds and hundreds of people. Like the scale is just totally different. But so there's goods and bads in both of them. But I wouldn't give up my experience in either one of them. My early experience is in the smaller one. It was definitely needed and it was definitely worked out for me. But now here being in a smaller firm, I really enjoy it myself also. So it's been great here.
Yeah, that's a big transition, and I think you did a good job of explaining the differences between them. I did want to dig into some of more of those nuances between the smaller and the larger firms. For example, the mentorship. I think there's what do you think about the mentorship between a smaller versus a larger firm? Because it seems to me that maybe more intimate in a small firm, but maybe with a bigger firm, you have a lot more resources, but less intimacy. How do you see that?
So yes and no. So in the smaller firm, yes, the owner of the company was very hands-on with you at the beginning, but his time was very limited because he was also hustling on the street trying to get work and trying to get jobs. And then he's also reviewing and QA/QCing every other engineer's work too. So yes, you did work with him, but you did have to find time to work with him. I think where I am in the larger firm, and I have 2 engineers underneath me right now, I'm not away that they as much as when the owner of the business for the smaller firm. I am there. I am present. So I do feel like that you would think that you just become a cog in the machine, and maybe it's depending on what firm you're in. But in the larger firm, I do think there is some more intimacy, and we do have that work together. And I'm not being pulled away to do miscellaneous things for a business because that's already being taken care of. So I have heard that about a larger firm, but from my experience, no, I'm not seeing that as much just because that's how it's set up where I am. But I could understand that, yeah, in a larger firm, you could just be just a cog that just sits there and just is designing a steel beam every day. I've heard those rumors. But that hasn't been my experience here, and I'm hoping everybody that I work with that wouldn't be the experience. When any engineer that I want to work with, I want to show them everything. I want them to be a full, well-rounded structural engineer.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like you said, I think it does depend on the firm. Like you were saying, either a bigger firm they could pigeonhole you, or they couldn't or maybe they have more time to mentorship you, or just so big that everyone's just doing their own thing. I think it really just depends on the firm's
It depends on
culture,
the
the company's
firm.
culture, yeah, and how they train their engineers. And what projects from smaller firms to larger firms? I assume there's probably larger projects and bigger firms. What was the difference that you saw between those project work?
Yeah. So in the smaller firms, we brought in smaller work, and then what happens is that since the smaller works have smaller fees, you need more of the smaller work to keep it
Ah,
going, to bring in the revenue. So there was a lot of quick, small turnover of quick renovations in New York City, a lot of residential quick renovations. Now in the larger firms, I am looking at projects that are just bigger on scale and have a duration that's longer as well, and that just comes hand in hand. We are a larger firm, we can offer more, so then we can chase after the larger projects and the bigger projects. So then when you're chasing after the bigger projects, you're going to have more time to do that. So yeah, there definitely is a difference. The smaller firms was definitely a smaller, mostly like a lot of renovations, a lot of quick renovations, and you're in and out. Now that I'm in a larger firms, it's bigger scale projects. Sometimes I'm working with a site civil engineer that's in house as well. So you're working on a huge development of the whole land where he's doing the site, and then there's multiple buildings that have to go on within the site too. So it's definitely on a bigger scale. And as far as a time, you do have more time to start producing the work. But it's still, at the end of the day, it's still the same structural engineering though. So
yeah, with the
yes, there
bigger
definitely is a difference.
projects, a bigger scale.
Yeah.
And you did mention that in a smaller firm, you have many hats because there's not enough employees. You're doing everything in a smaller firm, and with bigger firm, you have more resources. People can do the accounting for you. How do you think that influenced your skill learning? Like I imagine maybe in a smaller firm, you have to develop, for example, if you're an engineer and you become a manager, then you have to develop business development skills. You have to focus on that. But maybe in a bigger firm, some of those skills, I guess there's specialists, you would call them for some of those. How does that affect that? And do you think that was a good thing in terms of, I guess, the skills that you learn?
Definitely a good thing. So in the smaller firms, one of the big tasks that it was asked of me after I'd been there for a few years was to start promoting the firm and start bringing in clients, or start maintaining the clients that we have. And it could just be, conversations on the phones, where you can't just be black and white, and you can't just be, a numbers guy. You have to be able to talk with our clients. Were architects, and so you have to be able to talk with an architect. You have to be able to kind of speak on his language. You can't just be, there is this myth about engineers that we're just bookworms, but you have to be able to come out of your shell and speak with an architect, because the architect is not necessarily going to be on the same wavelength of an engineer, but that's your client, and that's who you really need to wine and dine. And you need to not just talk to him about projects, but be able to talk to him about anything. So that was definitely a skill that was sharpened with me. Whether or not I was deliberately trying to market myself to these architects, maybe, but in some ways, I was just being nice and just being friendly with them, and just, if you're open with them and you can have a dialogue with them, they're going to come back to you and they're going to want to hire you again. So every engineer could produce drawings, but can you have a good working relationship with your client? So that I took away from the small company, where, how to treat your client, and your client is always number one. So then when I come to the larger firm, I already have that as a tool of mine. Then I'm able to talk with new architects. I'm at a new firm. I'm now talking to new consultants, and you have to develop that skill, because that's the reason why people come back to you. they're going to come back to you because they enjoy working with you. Yeah, you have to be producing a good drawing and a good design, but it's also that coordination period between you and your architect or whomever you're consulting with. It has to be a good relationship, or else they're not going to hire you again. And I feel that's what I developed when I was, working at the smaller firm. Whether I knew it or not, I was sharpening that tool and just learning that.
Yeah, it's like you were saying, the myth of the engineers that don't know how to communicate with other people, or the bookworms. They yeah, they usually don't last too long, at least in the structural engineering industry. Because like you were saying, you're gonna have to eventually talk to the
Yes.
architect and other people, and even other engineers and other disciplines. It's yeah, and the higher you go up in terms of position, I think that those interactions increase. So it's definitely a skill where you have to be technical and be good to work with. You have to be
Right.
nice to work with. So yeah, it's definitely a thing that we always see, and definitely we don't want to neglect that for the younger engineers.
Right. Right.
And what about, and one thing that I noted down that was of interest is, like, I think that's because for me, I personally work in a structural engineering mostly firm, and we're in between a medium to a large firm. So I can kind of see both ways. For me, I've never been in a huge, large firm. So yeah, talking to people like you, it's I get to that's how I get to live a large firm. So it's like
Right.
it's really interesting because the points that you said earlier about you do wear many hats, but you're the one that's doing everything. I think that was really great in terms of, for me as a younger engineer, learning all of those things. Like, you have to know how to sketch, you have to go on site visits, you have to do everything and work on all the projects. Sometimes you're even doing management roles for smaller projects, and you get to talk to the clients. I think that was a great opportunity to learn. But then what you were saying about larger firms is now you have all of these resources around you where you can talk, and I think you can learn a lot more in terms of the whole building process when you have the architect there, the geotech there, all the
That's right.
disciplines there. Yeah, because there is a barrier, right, with hiring different disciplines. You got to pick up the phone. Are they there? And then it's usually mainly business. But I feel if you can just walk over to their office and just have a casual chat about things like that and ask casual questions, I think that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, it definitely makes the job easier. If if my geotech was a sub consultant and I had a small little question, do I want to
Mhm.
bother him in the middle of the day?
Yeah.
But if he's right around the corner, I could just pop in and say, "Hey, what do you think about this? Is this really an issue? Should I be really thinking about this?" And he can easily say yes or no, and give me an answer right away. Where before in the smaller firm, I'd have to get somebody on the phone, and it
Mhm.
would take up time, and and I'd be taking away from his time as well. So that is a huge advantage of where I'm at, and just having different services all under the same umbrella. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a plus.
For me, it'd be those dumb questions where it was like, "This is a dumb question. I'd feel bad if I called them," and it's like, yeah, I just had a dumb question and that's it.
Yeah.
But then I guess more in person, or if they're right there, it's a lot easier to ask those small questions that you're not a specialist of. So yeah.
Right. And
And
it's those small questions that could just linger. You're just like, huh,
yeah.
it doesn't,
Yeah.
how do I feel about it? I'm not totally 100% on board with this. Let me talk to an expert, and those small little questions that could just hang you up.
Yeah. And you also mentioned some of or could we get into the work life balance, maybe the culture of those, maybe from a smaller to a larger firm? I know you kind of mentioned it about with the parties, but what more did you see?
So, couple of different things, and this could be just how the two firms were run by each other. When it was in the smaller firm and it was a sole proprietorship, he he was very sometimes lax with your budgets, right?
Mhm.
He was mostly looking just to bring in quantity and get as many jobs as he can. And so if jobs went over budget, he can rationalize and say, well, we'll make it up in the next one. It wasn't as, we still did a timesheet every week, but your timesheet isn't as, it isn't as looked at over with like a fine comb or anything like that. When you do go into the larger firm, that is how you're judged. You're judged by your projects and your budgets. Are you keeping everything under budget? Or is your timesheet coming in? How are your hours? How are your billable hours? So that was a big difference when I went from small to large. There was definitely this feeling like, oh, okay, this is now my hour means something more than it used to when I was at the smaller firm. So it just can't be written off. So that was a big difference between the two cultures, I guess. The larger firm, you're definitely you're looked at as what is your performance, and your performance is coming straight from your timesheet. In terms of just work life balance, in the smaller firm, you're kind of on the whim of the sole proprietor. If he says, hey, we're not coming in on Good Friday, we're not coming in. That's not how it happens in the big firm. You are set with your holidays, and that's it. If you don't want to come in on Good Friday, you take a vacation day. So that's the difference. Not to say that where I'm at, the work-life balance, now that we're coming out of COVID, there is that still, you're allowed to be working from home certain days a week, and that is definitely a plus. Where I can only imagine in a smaller firm, they're probably working from home more days of the week than not. Where, yeah, I'm still working from home one day a week now that we're out of the pandemic, but there is the feeling around the larger firm. We'd like you to come back in. We'd like you to be here more often. You get that feeling. So that's the difference between the two. So one is definitely if you use an analogy like one is an aircraft carrier, and it's large and it's moving straight ahead, and it's not turning quickly, and it's going very straight.
Mhm.
And if it's turning very slowly. So that's what you're on board for. We're on the smaller firm, you're on like more of a PT boat, and it's quick. It's maneuvering very quick and easy, and it could stop and it can go, but then it could turn fast. But it could handle itself and move, as its own speed. We're on the larger one, you're just going straight ahead. So
Mhm.
and you feel that. You definitely feel the difference between the two. One is definitely flexible, and the other one, it's got to accommodate everybody in the firm. So that's the differences between the two.
One seems more, well, makes sense, right? If you're smaller, you're probably going to be more agile in terms of a company, probably more relaxed. But if you got thousands of employees, you got to keep that ship moving. And if everyone's doing their own thing, it's
Right.
gonna, yeah,
It can't
it's
happen.
harder to
Can't
move.
happen.
Before we go on here, I'd like to recognize our sponsor for this episode, PPI, a leader in engineering exam prep for the PE structural exam. PPI provides expert prep courses and study resources designed to help you pass the PE structural exam the first time. PPI's PE structural course is fully updated and taught with October 2021 code references and includes new editions of their PE structural books. PPI's live online courses include hours of lectures, problem-solving demonstrations, exam strategy sessions, office hours, and a passing guarantee. When you take a live online course, PPI guarantees you will pass, or you can take the on-demand course for free. PPI has helped engineers achieve their licensing goals since 1975. Check out PPI today at PPI2pass.com to see all of the resources available for PE structural exam prep. Again, that's PPI2pass.com.
Yeah, and you mentioned that I think we got the pros of like a smaller firm, but what were some of the most rewarding things when you went into a larger firm that you couldn't get at a smaller firm?
Rewarding things. We touched base on the multiple disciplines, which is great. But then the access to any kind of software I wanted,
Oh,
that
yeah.
was any software, any textbook, easy. You would just send a message, and they would get it hooked up for you. Uh, where in the smaller firm, you'd have to justify, we really need this, it really could help us. And oh, how is that hurting our overhead? You would have to take a look at this. With a larger firm, there's no question. If you need the application, you're going to get the application. If you need the textbook, if you need the code, you're getting it. It's not a question. With a smaller firm, you have to weigh the overheads with everything else. So that was definitely a plus. And it's also true. The social thing is gigantic. Going out of work and hanging out with multiple people and multiple engineers outside of work, it's good. It's stimulating. You share ideas that way too. So it's a huge plus being in a large firm. We do a lot of we have a large Christmas party every year where you touch base with people that you only see on a Teams call from other offices, but you touch base with them like you know them, like they work right around the corner from you. So that is definitely a plus at working at a larger firm.
Yeah, sounds pretty cool. And then it seems like to me, it seemed that the projects would, if that's your type of thing where you like working on bigger projects, it seems that'd be pretty cool too.
Right, right.
And I did have one final question, Will, more like advice for our listeners. So for our listeners that are looking to get either into a smaller firm or a larger firm, do you have any advice for them maybe on what they need in their career or which ones they should consider choosing when they're job hunting?
Well, I'm biased. I started out in a smaller firm and I thought it did me really well, just because it was almost like a pressure cooker. I got to go out on site, the first week and started to see things up close right away. And that didn't stop. And so you're constantly turning over projects and you're constantly working on your design and sharpening your designs. And you're seeing all these different materials. So for me, I would definitely say coming out of school, if you could try to get a really well-oiled small firm, I like that idea. And then if you want to progress to something different, I think it was a very good idea that I switched over just so I could see how the larger firms are. At the time I switched, I thought that working at the smaller firm had run its course, and I was ready to see how other engineer firms do it. And so going from very small to very large, yes, there was transition, but I wouldn't give it up for anything. Just seeing how other people do the same, it's the same engineering, but how is the company running? So yeah, I'm biased. I would say starting out in a small firm would definitely get you going quicker. But that's coming from my point of view. Yeah. So but when I was coming out of school, like I said, I was looking in the classifieds and I was just trying to find any job I could find. And
Yeah.
and I was offered this job and it's like, yes, let's do it. So I'm not sure how lucky you are coming out of school. If you have multiple different options, you can, if you are, good for you. You can take your pick. But for me, it was just a handful of firms I was choosing from. So and I think I just worked out well. So but yeah, starting out in a small firm and figuring it all out then. And I would say after you get your P, if you want to try something different, then yeah, that'd be fine.
Yeah, that's great advice. It seems like, if you're already a professional engineer and you want to change companies or something, I mean, those are things that you can consider for maybe for a smaller firm. For a larger firm, I think you can see the big difference. They have a lot more resources and a lot more people if that's your type of culture that you're looking for. And if you're a structural engineering student and you're looking to get your first position, I think what Will pretty much says, and I was trying to tell younger engineers too, going into a smaller firm isn't the end of the world. Like, I know a lot of students coming out, they want to go work for the huge firms, but you have a lot of competition, and chances are, no matter how good you are, you're probably not going to get into those just because you have so many applicants. Like, go for a smaller firm. You can learn sometimes even a lot more, get put in the hot seat, but you get to learn a lot more. And, once you get those licenses, then you can go wherever you want. So small firms definitely are not a con in your career and can actually help you out into a good part of your career path. So yeah, Will,
Right.
thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and a lot of it also depends on, if you are looking at a small firm, is the owner of the company. You know, what is his
Good point.
background? What is his skills? Um, Obviously, he has to teach you, but how well is he as a structural engineer? So, and I think I got lucky that way. So the owner that where I worked at, he had come from a very large AE firm, so he was well established, and he was doing very large buildings in the city, and then he opened up his own practice. So he was already very well established as a structural engineer. So I think I got lucky that way. But yes, not just a small firm, but a small firm with somebody that has the knowledge and has the direction.
Yeah, and you also shared some things about the benefits of a large firm, and that was really cool for me to hear. Coming, you've been in there for 10 years and seeing what all the different dynamics coming from me, at least personally. Like I don't know what a big firm is like, so you telling me all the differences and some of the big advantages of that too. I yeah, definitely things that I never really knew about, and busting some of those myths of you're always going to be pigeonholed in a big firm or things like that.
Yeah,
So thanks for talking about that.
yeah, but it all depends on what firm you go to too. So
Yeah,
yes,
culture's a big thing, like you were saying,
yeah.
and uh, and do you have any? Sorry, I have another question just because you
No
brought
problem.
that up. So for maybe someone looking to get into a big firm, because you mentioned culture, uh, would you recommend? I guess talking to some of the employees beforehand in a big firm to get a feel of their culture. What do you think probably the best way
I,
is to for someone to
yeah,
gauge that?
culture, but then also, when you're doing an interview, they're going to be asking you questions and trying to
Mm,
figure you out. But you should definitely be asking them questions. What projects am I going to be working on? What are the tasks I'm going to be doing? My first year here, what do you see me doing? I don't want to just be doing a beam, or I don't want to just be uh, out on a site looking at how concrete is being poured. I don't want that. I want to start designing. Am I going to be able to design it? Who am I going to be working under? The person I'm going to be working under, what are their types of jobs, and how are they going to be bringing me into that job? And what would my task be underneath him? And then, yeah, if I could speak to other people that, maybe a year or two ahead of me, what had they been doing the past few years after they got hired? Is it something that I want to be doing? I don't want to just, if I was a young engineer, I wouldn't want to just be pigeonholed. And I would want to make sure that I'm asking those questions to figure out, am I just going to be put in a corner and review shop drawings all day? Or am I really going to be designing? Because I'm a structural engineer, I want to start designing, and I want to start somebody to teach me. So in your interviews, you should be asking those questions. What am I going to be doing? What are my tasks? How am I going to be designing? What am I going to be designing? Who am I going to be working under? What are their qualifications? What are the other people like that work under him as well? What are they doing? So those interviews have to go both ways. You have to figure out for yourself what you're getting into as well.
Yeah, great advice. Well, I know some interviews, yeah, it can't just be one way because the company wants one thing, but if you don't know what you're looking for as a potential employee, then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. So
Right.
it's
Right.
got to go both ways. Yeah. So
Right.
thanks for that.
And it's
That's
easy.
great
It's
advice.
easy for us to say that because we're old and we've done it before. But it's tough for a 22-year-old coming out of school. They wouldn't know anything. But if you do push yourself to have the initiative to try to figure out what you want when you're 22. You want to be a structural engineer, but beyond that, how do you get there? And it's tough to answer as a 22-year-old, but try to have a little bit more introspective when you do interview.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much, Will. Thanks for coming on and talking about small and large firms and the differences between them. Definitely appreciate it.
Okay, great.
Hope you enjoyed the episode today. We'd love to hear your feedback, comments, and or questions. To leave them, please visit structuralengineeringchannel.com. There you'll find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources or websites mentioned during the episode. Don't forget to subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next time, we wish you the best in all of your structural engineering endeavors.